This program was made possible in part by funding from Education's Next Horizon, Louisiana's only statewide nonprofit dedicated solely to improving pre-K through 12 education, and a leading advocate for policies that ensure college and career readiness. And ExxonMobil Baton Rouge, investing in a brighter future for today's students by focusing its energy on science, technology, engineering, and math education. Support for this program is also provided by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting.
Hello and welcome to a special town hall edition of Louisiana Public Square. I'm Beth Courtney, president of LPB.
And I'm Kirby Goidel, professor of political science and mass communication at LSU. Not since the expression new math have two words stirred up so much passion in education circles as the term Common Core. The teaching standards that bear the name are part of an initiative to set a common benchmark for math and English achievement in all 50 states. While Louisiana adopted the standards in 2010, they won't take full effect in kindergarten through high school into the 2014 school year.
Well, in Louisiana, Common Core has not been without fallout. Opponents have painted Common Core as an attempted federal takeover of education and are pushing for its repeal. Complaints about how quickly the standards were being implemented led to a 2-year postponement of teacher evaluations tied to them. And many parents and students feel lost, caught in the middle of a major transformation without enough information. Well, over the next hour, Louisiana Public Square will hopefully bring some calm and clarity to the issue as it attempts to decode Common Core.
So this is what 3/4 look like. This is what 1 1/2 would look like. So who ate more pizza, Datron or LeBron?
5th grade math teacher Keisha Fleming is working through a word problem to teach the addition of fractions with unlike denominators. Before the Common Core standards were adopted by the state, Fleming's expectations may have been just the answer. Now students are expected to be able to explain why that answer is correct.
With Common Core, you have to know more than just the surface. You have to delve into, you have to know the depth of it. And I think once students are able to explain what they're doing, then they're comfortable in math.
Fleming has seen firsthand the consequences of students being unprepared to think independently.
I used to work in a district where there are majority chemical plants. And because students were not able to be precise with math or be able to explain their mathematical thinking, they were not able to get those plant jobs.
Let's reach higher.
The desire for a better educated workforce prompted industry giant ExxonMobil to finance pro-Common Core ads during the Masters Golf Tournament last year. The company also participated in a panel on the initiative sponsored by the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry in October. Ken Miller is the engineering services manager for the Baton Rouge refinery and chemical plant.
And this really is all about critical thinking skills, reasoning skills, the kinds of things that allow individuals to take the learning from an academic setting into a work setting and be able to function and be very effective.
State Education Superintendent John White says the Common Core standards are needed to keep all of America competitive.
We're slipping to a point where we are in the 20s in terms of ranked nations, in terms of math and English skills for our adults, to a point where we have fewer high school and college graduates than we did a generation ago.
So what exactly is Common Core? A recent Gallup poll found that 62% of respondents and 55% of public school parents didn't know anything about the new academic standards.
Well, basically, the Common Core standards are standards that basically describe what students at various grade levels ought to know and be able to do.
Barry Erwin is the president of the Council for a Better Louisiana, which supports Common Core. Erwin says the standards evolved from a requirement in President George W. Bush's No Child Left Behind Act for states to create their own educational standards. That approach, Erwin says, resulted in an uneven assortment of benchmarks with varying degrees of rigor.
So with the National Governors Association and an association of state superintendents, they got together and basically created a set of voluntary standards. They came up with them themselves. The federal government didn't create them, didn't mandate them, doesn't require them. But they came up with them themselves, and that is essentially the Common Core.
The standards apply to math and English in kindergarten through 12th grade. 45 states, including Louisiana, have adopted them. Erwin says that Louisiana's prior benchmarks were low when compared to other states.
Our standards are about a grade level behind of what you see in some of the other higher performing states. So there's no question that we need to add more rigor and increase our standards.
For language arts teacher Mercedes Schneider, the goal that her 10th grade students be able to read literary nonfiction independently and proficiently by year's end is unrealistic.
They don't have the background knowledge. They don't have the prior knowledge necessary in order to think critically about the text.
Schneider also objects to what she sees as a broader movement by reformers pushing Common Core to standardize the nation educationally.
If standardization was such a great idea, then the higher end, upper crust private schools would be doing it. They would advertise, we are on Common Core and we're going to give your students tests to measure their knowledge based on Common Core. I challenge any reformer to find a high-end private school that does as much.
Scott Richard is director of the Louisiana School Boards Association. He says poor implementation of Common Core by Louisiana's Education Department and the lack of a state curricula has caused frustration among teachers statewide.
All those things coupled with the education reform legislative session in 2012 with teacher evaluations and letter grade labeling, all those things coupled together have pretty much created a educational tsunami in Louisiana.
Due to pushback from educators, the evaluation of schools and teachers tied to Common Core achievement has been delayed by the state for 2 years. Plans to measure students' Common Core achievement through online testing is a financial concern, Richard says, especially for smaller rural districts.
To phase in and move towards a online testing environment has really created some challenges for districts to prioritize those dollars for testing. And to ask local school districts to do that without additional funding, many districts are looking at it as an unfunded mandate.
While a move to abolish the implementation of Common Core died in the Senate last year, some legislators have vowed to review the state's involvement this session, something Governor Jindal, an initial proponent of Common Core, welcomes.
I think there are some legitimate concerns that have been raised about how Common Core has been developed and implemented. So I think the conversation needs to continue.
For Richard, any activity that gets more information about Common Core out to the public is a good thing.
Most educators are certainly aware of what's going on, but parents need to be informed, leaders need to be informed, because it affects every citizen in the state of Louisiana one way or another.
Well, helping to get the word out about Common Core is our distinguished panel of experts we have here in the studio. Ken Miller is the Engineering Service Manager of ExxonMobil in Baton Rouge. ExxonMobil supports the Common Core standards. Lee Barrios is a retired educator and public education activist who is opposed to Common Core. Ken Bradford is Assistant Superintendent with the Louisiana Department of Education's Office of Content. His agency oversees the implementation of the Common Core standards. And State Representative Brett Geymann is a Republican from Lake Charles who's drafted legislation that would allow Louisiana to opt out of Common Core. Maya Bennett is the reading interventionist at Capitol Elementary and also serves as a Common Core teacher leader and advisor for the Department of Education. Well, we welcome you all to the studio, and we have, I'm sure, lots of questions for you. But first, Kirby, you have some information about a survey, right?
Yeah, I have some amazing information about a survey done by the LSU's Public Policy Research Lab. They asked over 160 Louisiana residents about tonight's topic. Among the findings, when asked about the rigor of current academic standards in Louisiana public schools, the majority of respondents, 63%, think they are not demanding enough. When asked about the rigor of the Common Core standards, a plurality, 49%, said they were not demanding enough. Yet, when asked how familiar they are with the Math and English Common Core standards that Louisiana has adopted, a total of 76% of those surveyed are not very familiar with those standards. Now, lucky for us, we have someone in the audience tonight, Ms. Talladeno, who is on a fact-finding mission, and she's here to ask the opening question to our panel. Would you stand up and tell them who you represent?
Good evening. I'm Lacey Talladeno, and I represent the St. Tammany West Chamber of Commerce. I am its CEO. And our question is, as most chambers, we serve as the voice of business on behalf of our 1,000 members. And I am here on a fact-finding mission because we have heard very differing opinions from business leaders and citizens, parents, teachers on Common Core. So I am here as part of that mission and would like to ask all the members of the panel, why should we oppose or support Common Core prior to the upcoming legislative session?
We can start with you, Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Lacey. Appreciate the question, and thanks again to LPB and Education's Next Horizon for engaging with this important discussion this afternoon. To directly answer your question, we would say yes, we do support higher education standards, and from our perspective, those are required to be able to drive the critical thinking skills and higher capability in math and science that our children need to compete effectively in the workforce and position them for the brightest possible future. Just a quick perspective, we have an abundance of natural gas, a very economically advantaged situation here domestically that will create potentially 46,000 jobs in the chemical industry, another 500,000 jobs in related industries. It's our responsibility to make sure our children are properly prepared to compete for those jobs, and we believe the higher standards will let them do so effectively.
Ms. Barrios.
I would like to address that. There are a couple of reasons or points I'd like to make. First of all, I don't believe the Chamber or the public in general should be supporting a set of standards that hasn't been researched, tested, created by K-12 educators, and proven to be effective. They were, as we all know now, introduced far too quickly. Teachers weren't prepared and they weren't provided with the resources. But the second most important component is that, and particularly with business interests in mind as you have, we're looking for our children to be creative and entrepreneurs. The United States is known for that. And the lack of the ability or the use of divergent thinking and creative thinking in these Common Core standards does not lend itself to developing that sort of student.
Mr. Bradford.
Yeah, I'd just like to clarify it on Ms. Barrios' comment in that the Common Core state standards, they were developed by teachers, educators, college professors, and content experts. They also went through a validation committee, a validation panel with the Common Core state standards. And then when they came to the state and they were released, they were reviewed by teachers in Louisiana, educators in Louisiana, and the LSU STEM Kane Center for Literacy. So they have been reviewed. To your point, though, you know, the Workforce Commission has released data that says that by the year 2020, there'll be 2.25 million new jobs in Louisiana, 50% of them which will require either a 2 or 4 year degree. In the 2012 report, first-time freshman report, 1/3 of Louisiana students that were going to college had to take a remedial course. And so I think that in itself says that we need to raise the rigor of the standards.
Representative Geymann.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And look, there's no one in this audience or anywhere across this state that doesn't want the best for their kids and the best for the students of this state. And I haven't talked to anyone who doesn't want to raise expectations. The question is, who's going to determine what those standards are, okay? This was done by 2 nonprofit groups, private groups, no public meetings, no open discussion where there was a vote taken anywhere, no accountability. And those are things that concern me. The problem is, to me, we have shifted away local control and we've given it over to more of a federal intrusion into our education system through the Common Core standards. We can do this right here in Louisiana. We can raise our expectations. We don't have to be a part of a global United States common standard where every state is teaching the exact same curriculum. We don't have to do that. We can raise our standards right here in Louisiana, and we can do that right here. And I think the control needs to be more local, where parents have involvement. We hear all these great talking points. We all want what's best. We all want to compete. We want to prepare our kids for the job force or the college and all the things we want to do. Absolutely, we want to do that. Why then, across this whole entire country, are people having problems with Common Core? I read today that the state of South Carolina, the governor said they're going to get out. It's a Republican governor. She said, we're going to get out. I'm going to sign the bill when it hits my desk. We have problems all over the country because it's hitting the kitchen table. Parents are seeing it, and they're understanding we have some issues here. We want to make some changes. They had no involvement in this. 2 people on the validation committee did not sign off on it. The math content expert and the English language arts expert did not sign off on it. This is not as rosy as we paint the picture to be. I think we need to take this back over, do it at the state level, and we can still raise the benchmark and the expectations as high as we want to raise them. We can do it right here in Louisiana. That's my concern. I would say we need to oppose being part of Common Core.
Ms. Bennett.
Certainly. I believe it's our moral imperative to support the Common Core state standards. It represents an unprecedented opportunity for collaboration, a real state-led effort to create standards that will actually prepare our students for college and career success. I am thrilled about Common Core because the standards are internationally benchmarked. So now in our global economy, our students will graduate prepared for not only global citizenship, but global leadership. And I think that our students deserve the very best, and Common Core state standards represent that. And as a teacher in school every day with students who represent a disadvantaged background, I can assure you our kids are ready. It's just a matter of teachers and our community being ready.
All right, well, is our community ready? We have a community member here, a businessman, Eddie Risponi. You have a question, right?
I do. I'm Eddie Risponi. I'm chairman of ISC Constructors. We're an electrical and instrumentation, specialty engineering and construction company, and we work all over the United States, but predominantly in the Gulf Coast. I've personally been involved with workforce development now for 3 decades, and was also involved and still involved with the Louisiana Workforce Investment Council when we formed it several years ago. About 2 decades ago, as contractors and as owners around the country, we realized that we all had different curriculums for training craft persons. So many organizations came together and formed what they call the National Center for Construction Education and Research, and developed a curriculum as well as an assessment that could be used for craft training around the country, and standardized it. We came together to do that, and now our craft persons can be trained, move anywhere in the country, anywhere in the state, and we can compete anywhere in this state as well as around the country and around the world.
So your question?
My question is, Representative, why wouldn't we, and you as a business person, why wouldn't you want to take advantage of that and have our children compete both throughout our state, throughout our country, and around the world with higher standards? Thank you.
Look, it's a great question, and I agree. We do need to raise expectations, and we can have a set of standards, but to say we're going to put a 5/8" nut on every car and have a certain wrench to fit that nut across, and standardize that's a great thing. And to do that in the workforce, could possibly be a very good thing. But why do you want to standardize Louisiana with New Hampshire and California and Finland and Poland and China? To me, that's a problem. We have cultural differences. We have different sets of values here in Louisiana than people in other states across the country. Look, I love New Hampshire. I'm glad they're part of this country. I don't want to teach my kids like them. I don't want them to be New Hampshire. And I think the problem is once we turn away that control and we give it to the federal level, we lose. We're done. We have no input anymore at the parent level and the local level, and I think that's something that this country has been founded on. American exceptionalism is what has separated us from the rest of the planet for over 200 years. Look, I want to raise the bar. You raise it as high as you want to raise it, make it a reachable goal, and let's go do that. No, I'm not opposed to that. I don't want the federal government telling us exactly how we have to do this. And look, they're going to say the federal government has nothing to do with this and it's not a federal curriculum. Absolutely it is when you're having to pass the PARCC test. That's a national assessment. Your evaluation, your teacher pay, everything is built on student performance. You're going to have to teach to that. Your kids are going to have to pass the PARCC test. By default, it's going to become more national. And I think that's the concern that parents have.
Representative, let's get this clear, though. Ken Bradford, it isn't a national curriculum, is it?
Yeah, we would. There is a difference between a standard and a curriculum. And a standard is a task that a student must achieve by the end of the course or the end of the school year. The curriculum encompasses the textbook, the resources that go along that the teachers are using, etc. And we would agree with the representative that we do not want a national curriculum. We believe in local control. And there's a standard, a task that a student must achieve by the end of the year, but then the school districts and the schools have the flexibility to identify the appropriate curriculum that they would like to use in the textbook. I'd like to say that the PARCC exam itself is also not a national exam. The PARCC exam is a consortia of states that have come together to say we would like to develop an assessment to measure the Common Core state standards. And Louisiana is one of 25 states that's participating in the PARCC exams. And those exam assessment items have been developed in unison with all of the 25 states, and they've included Louisiana educators and teachers.
Okay, we're going to go over your side, Kirby. Yeah.
Mr. Desotels, would you ask your question? You're not. Are you convinced?
No. My name is Michael Desotel. I'm a retired educator, and I write a blog for educators and for parents. And in my research for the blog, I found that out of the 25 persons who were appointed to write the standards, there was not a single practicing classroom teacher in that group. Now, later on, teachers got to look at it, but there weren't many changes made. So my question to the Exxon representative in particular is, if you were going to revamp your procedure for one of your plants, would you consider doing it would it be wise to do that without consulting with the operators, the people who are experienced on the job and who are going to have to make it work? Would that make any sense?
Very good question, and thank you. And I agree with you that we would certainly consult with the operators and the people that operate the plant. But we would have the engineers and the higher skilled folks actually develop the standards. And from what, and again, I'm not a professional educator, but I do know that, for example, we've got representatives from the Kane Center here, that there were a number of professional educators from the Kane Center that were involved in actually developing the standards, and then they were reviewed by teachers later. So at least from where we sit, it seems to be a very similar process to one that we would follow.
Ms. Barrios, what's your view of this?
Well, as a professional educator, I would like to have the time to educate the public from an educational perspective what's wrong with the Common Core standards. Now, I know we hear that it's only a set of standards. If it were only a set of standards, which all the states have had for quite some time, and Louisiana's was actually considered to be quite good, teachers would have no problem with it. It's a benchmark. However, these standards are inextricably attached to a high stakes, meaning students will pass or fail based on it, teachers will lose their employment or be deemed highly effective by virtue of it, and schools can be closed because of it as a result of it. It's a high stakes standardized test. So we have moved from standards to standardization, two very different things, and it's a slippery slope. And in order for that test to be used as high stakes, according to policy of U.S. Ed and research, it has to be aligned with a curriculum. So the curriculum will be standardized, it will be based on the test, and the test is based on the standards.
Well, Maya, you're a teacher as well, and you, tell me, are you worried that your students aren't going to be able to, that their parents will be outraged and they won't be able to go forward and pass these tests, these standardized tests?
No, I'm not worried at all, actually. For years before Common Core was introduced, I yielded lots of concerns from parents regarding their child preparation and their lack thereof. And so when Common Core came about and I had the opportunity to actually meet with parents and show them what it looks like in practice, they've been welcomed with open arms, and our students have really risen to the occasion. It's remarkable that the Common Core state standards emphasize speaking and listening, which is an incredibly important and powerful skill that is essential for 21st century success. And I have received students at the beginning of the year who were nonverbal, and by virtue of creating a verbally rich classroom that is steeped with language and questions and Socratic seminars, those students leave me able to speak and engage in ways that they weren't before. So Common Core is just incredibly powerful, and I feel like my parents are ready and my kids are too.
All right, we have some other questions here. Sir, would you like to ask a question? Give us your name.
Brian Adams with Teach for America, South Louisiana. Teach for America is a nonprofit that brings teachers and leaders into some of the highest need schools across the country. My question relates to, if you look at Louisiana, it ranked near the very bottom of the NAEP exam results and has continued to lag behind educational achievement, at least in part because our standards have been historically lower than the standards of other states. Common Core was an attempt to basically get our students to a point where they could be competitive with other states. So my question is to the panel, do you believe that all of Louisiana students are able to achieve at these higher standards? And if so, what is it going to take? And if you don't believe Louisiana students are able to achieve at these standards, then what would you suggest as standards that should be in place?
All right, so that's a pretty tough question, but I'm sure, yes, Lee, to you?
First of all, standards don't set the bar for the classroom. The teacher sets the bar based on her classroom, the individual students in it. We've been told for years and learned how to individualize lessons for students because they're all different and learn at different levels at different speeds. So standards, you can raise the bar for standards all you want. The teacher in the classroom determines how to present that material and what her students at any given time can accept. As far as the NAEP is concerned, there is an absolute direct correlation between socioeconomic status and how students perform on standardized tests, both with the PISA, which is an international test, and with the NAEP test, which is in the United States. Louisiana is, I believe, second to the last highest poverty in the United States. Therefore, that has a lot to do with that correlation. And internationally, if you disaggregate student scores from the United States on the PISA test and separate those in poverty from those who are not, and compare them to, say, Finland, which is supposed to be at the top and has basically zero poverty, we're right up there toward the top with those nations.
So, but you're saying then that poor students can't achieve.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that they need a different presentation. They need to be worked with more intensely and in different ways.
Anybody else want to jump in on this one? Yeah, I can.
You know, as a former school teacher at North Baton Rouge, high school teacher for 7 years myself, and currently having 3 children in the rural Louisiana in the public school system in grades 3, 5, and 9. You know, I would say that I would also support what Maya was saying about the standards. But as far as the NAEP exam, the NAEP exam, she is correct. We're ranked 47th is our best rating, and that's on our 8th grade math for the NAEP rating. And so we do need to raise the standards, and we would agree that every student, regardless of socioeconomic class, should have access to a rigorous curriculum, and we would agree that they all should.
But what I'm hearing, though, is that there are different approaches that should be taken, Lee. That's what you're saying, right?
Right, and also that a standardized test, which is the measurement we're using to measure, it's a quantitative test used to measure a qualitative, the quality of learning. You can't measure quality with quantitative measures. A standardized test does not show how much a student has learned. It shows how many questions they've answered correctly on that test.
But what we're hearing, though, from some of our business people is people arrive and they're not prepared. Is that what you're hearing, Ken?
Yes, we are seeing a higher degree of applicants for jobs not qualified to fill the jobs. We are seeing higher degree of difficulty. We do test our applicants for math and science capability before they come in the door, and unfortunately we're seeing a significant percentage that are not passing, which is a significant driver for the reason that we're supporting going forward with the standards.
And that makes sense, since No Child Left Behind instituted standardized testing, was it 13, 14 years ago, that is the problem with standardized testing, narrowing the curriculum, focusing on a test.
Brett, you represent.
One thing that seems to be missing out of this conversation is there is nothing prohibiting us from doing this now. We don't have to join Common Core to raise our expectations and to change the student learning here in Louisiana and to move from 47 up. It's been 47 or 49 as long as I can remember. None of us like that. Yeah. Nobody has been proud that we're 47. Okay? But a radical change in education, by the way, it was not state-led. State-led means that all the legislative bodies across 50 states got together, had discussion, open forums, public meetings, testifying, and somebody voted, and then we came to this consensus. You know, picture the Constitutional Convention type atmosphere. That's not what happened. This was not state-led. State-led is if somebody's held accountable. And so why do we want to give that up so that in the name of having a better qualified employee? We want them to. I want better qualified employees to show up at my door as well. We can do that right now. Our teachers are wonderful. They can do that. We can raise the expectations, provide the resources we need, and we can do that. Forget joining Common Core.
So state-led by whom?
Well, state-led by the National Governors Association, which is a private group. That's not state-led. When you talk about state-led, people think that you've actually discussed the issue. Parents and teachers and experts have gotten to come and testify. You've identified problem areas, and you've tried to solve those problems. We have not done that. It's unrolled to us, we're in it, and now we have all these problems and you can't fix it because it's been written, it's done, and we're in. And now we have to do the PARCC test. And by the way, if you have 25 states doing the PARCC test, how is it common anyway? What are the other 25 states doing? I mean, this whole thing is baffling to me.
Okay. We have a question from someone who, and forgive me if I mischaracterize your opinion, but was started off skeptical and is now maybe more convinced. Is that a fair representation?
I wouldn't say that. My name's Ryan Booth, and I'm a member of the Republican State Central Committee and a conservative political activist. And I'm also a former public school teacher in Baton Rouge, taught middle school math for 3 years in the Baton Rouge system. And I strongly support the standards because they're not a federal takeover. Representative Geymann says that they are, and then he says that they might be in the future. He knows there's no federal role in this conspiracy theory that there might be a federal takeover later. I don't see any basis whatsoever for that except fear, and I don't think that's a good motivation for politics. And as a former teacher, I support the standards because the old standards were not good. Teaching 6th grade math when maybe 1/5 of your students know their times tables and you're trying to teach them more complicated concepts because they didn't get the depth that they needed in those standards, because Louisiana's old standards were so broad. They were a mile wide and an inch deep, and kids did not learn the essential facts that they needed to learn. So those are reasons that I strongly support the standards. And my question is for Representative Geymann. What about Louisiana students do you think is so different that they shouldn't learn their multiplication tables in 3rd grade? You claim that we can raise our standards, but in opposing the Common Core standards, you're not proposing to raise our standards. You're proposing to go back to the old standards, unless I don't see any proposal from you to this is how we could raise our standards separately. And I would ask, aren't you really saying that Louisiana students should be held to a lower standard?
Yeah, well, you will see a proposal, sir, and I think it's a great question. You will see, actually I have 12 legislative instruments dealing with this topic, so you will see a group of us in the legislative body proposing an alternative to Common Core that will do the same thing. It will raise the expectations. It will do some of the things that are good about Common Core, by the way. There are some things that are good about it. The conspiracy theory thing is, a lot of people like to look at the opposition and say, you're a bunch of, whatever, and you got this conspiracy theory going on. I'm sorry, but, Texas didn't join it. Texas did not join it. I believe Exxon's located in Dallas. I mean, there's nothing wrong with Texas necessarily. So, I mean, let's don't get into the conspiracy theory issue, and let's talk about whether or not we want to control our education here in Louisiana, or do we want to turn it over to a national agenda of common state curriculum. And it will, by the way, it has to be a national curriculum if you're passing a national assessment. Let's do that here locally in Louisiana with experts. There's nothing prohibiting us from doing that now.
Beth, you have a question. Please stand up. You're not so happy with it, right?
No, I'm not.
All right.
I am a former educator. I taught college-bound students for 20 years. I am now an independent research consultant in education and public policy. And since the implementation of Common Core in my district this year, I am now a homeschool mother. I have pulled my child from the system. And I have several reasons I'm concerned about Common Core. One of them is the curriculum, which especially the content, and the other is the instruction, and then thirdly is the data sharing. So those are some main concerns that I have about the Common Core. Now, I would like to address my question to Ms. Bennett and then to Ms. Barrios. Essentially, if you look at the Common Core standards, if you read them in depth, you will notice that there is a particularly heavy emphasis upon a 1930s literary theory called New Criticism. And in that New Criticism, you will find the guidelines. Now, we're talking about the curriculum not being affected. The guidebook for being Common Core aligned, that was written by two of the people that wrote the standards, indicates that there's going to be an emphasis. In fact, it says in there, quote, heavy priorities on the Common Core based on this new criticism. I saw it in my son's own textbook. It was not going to get him college bound. It was not going to prepare him from college. So, Ms. Bennett, I'd like to address this to you. What do you consider might be the long-term effects of using a set of standards and annual assessments based heavily upon essentially one literary theory to the exclusion of approximately 12 other theories on the development of student literacy, particularly the college-bound kids, when they go to college, and the expectation in college is the ability to address text in multiple ways and for multiple purposes not addressed by the new criticism.
That's interesting. I've done a lot of reading, and I haven't seen that. Do you want to react to that, Maya?
Certainly, that's certainly new information for me. But to your question regarding the long-term vision for what Common Core means for our kids, I see an opportunity for the students of Louisiana to rise to the top of the nation in terms of our educational system. I also see an opportunity to annihilate poverty. I really think by holding all students in our country to standards that are internationally benchmarked, logical in progression, and thoughtful in terms of their intention to prepare students for college and career success, that we can really transform our state and our country and our children's lives, which is the most important thing. I'd like to also discuss the literacy component of Common Core. I think it's remarkable that we are now moving into an age where we have a balanced emphasis on informational text and literature. I think it's really important for our students to be able to grapple with informational text and really dissect it and take command of the English language so that they can speak the language of power, going back to those speaking and listening standards, and be able to compete globally for careers and the American dream, really. So I'm really excited about Common Core, and I think that as we move forward with implementation, we have to be really sensitive and kind to one another, recognizing that there will be mistakes made along the way, but there are brilliant opportunities for learning, and Common Core creates a remarkable collaboration opportunity. And I think our state's been really responsive in acknowledging that it will take time to get this right, so we're going to kind of lax the way that we hold schools accountable.
So, Lee, take time to get it right. I mean, that's certainly true. I mean, we're
well,
always,
To go back to the question, I think what Beth was referring to is the imbalance that is being created in the curriculum. Although we have a set of standards, it has reached over into the curriculum in requiring or stating that 70% in secondary schools, I believe it's 7th or 8th through 12th, are to focus 70% of their literature on informational texts as opposed to literature, say fiction, classical literature, that sort of thing. And the new criticism focuses on a literary method called close reading. And what it does is take a text and it asks the student to focus on that text without considering historical context or personal experience, all those, and to analyze that text based on that. Now, that is one methodology, and evidently it does help students that are slow learners or that are behind in their learning to get them jump-started, but is by no means should be focused on if a student is, especially if they're going to college, and they need the background of that literary analysis, which traditionally ELA teachers, which I was a secondary ELA teachers, have combined their study of classical literature with all the background information and the personal experience and historical and cultural context that go along with those. Perfect example, To Kill a Mockingbird.
One of the things we've talked about, and I'm going to throw it over to you, Kirby, and we have some students here, though. I'm going to get their opinions here in just a moment. And that is, We're asking people to show you how you got to the answer, and that's what you're really talking about in the whole math area. You have to show all the steps. Isn't that one of the things we were looking at? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a question from over here. State your name and
thank you.
Your organization. And
Keith Corville with the Associated Professional Educators of Louisiana. I just wanted to say that just listening to the panel, I'm a little disappointed. Our teachers are working so hard day and night, lesson planning, writing their own curriculum, yet on the panel we have individuals that are entertaining the idea of some sort of mythical federal curriculum. My question to the panel, specifically to Representative Geymann and Ms. Bennett, if the Common Core really represents a federal intrusion, why have all the Catholic dioceses in Louisiana voluntarily accepted the Common Core and have been implementing it, and why wouldn't we want the same opportunities in public school as we have in private school?
Well, I would come back and say, why did the professor from Notre Dame, along with 130 other Catholic professors across the country and high-level universities such as Stanford and so forth, come out with a letter to the Catholic schools asking them to not get into Common Core, and if you are in it, please get out. So here's the whole thing. If it's so good and working so good, why are we having this whole issue going across the nation with all these concerns? And I'm going to tell you why, because it was not state-led. You all did not get to have your input. We did not get to address these issues and try to work through them before we signed off on this curriculum or this set of standards that was developed by two nonprofit groups. That's the problem. And that's where I'm here tonight to tell you that I'm going to try to address that in a legislative session and bring it back here to the state where we can deal with those issues.
Beth, could I?
Sure, Ken.
I just wanted to speak to the process on the adoption. It's a state-led initiative where the Governors Association and the Chief Council of State School Officers coordinated and facilitated the development, and it was an opt-in by the states. It wasn't required by the states. But the State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education in Louisiana, the Bessie Board, is required by law every 7 years to review and adopt and refresh standards. And that's required in statute, in law. And then when they were released, they were open for public feedback, and that was back in March of 2010. And the education organizations in the state, the Louisiana Council for Teachers of Mathematics, the Louisiana Council for Teachers of English, the school superintendents associations, the teacher union associations, they all weighed in on the Common Core state standards, and then they were eventually adopted by the state board.
There was not a vote held prior to Bessie. There was not a public, open meeting where you could come and participate. It did not happen. It was voluntary. There was race to the top dollars that were attached to it. There was an incentive for us to do this. And look, on the cover it looks good. The point is we did it without, it was not state-led because you all were not involved. It was a very small group of people that were involved. Bessie did, there was a vote taken when Bessie, boom, we adopted. That was already developed. Up until that, Bessie developed its own set of standards every 7 years. That's what we need to go back to with more experts involved, and we can raise that bar as high as you want to do it.
7 years is a long time these days. As I look at computer software, they make me upgraded about it. It looks like every 6 months, but it's probably 3 years now. And so 7 years is a long time to see whether something works well or not. And one of the things as I've read, and maybe you all react to it, and I have a student here, it's some people who have been adopting it and done the testing. Evidently, a lot of the children are failing, and parents then get very excited and come and then complain about it. And that is a problem, is it not? Yeah.
Certainly. So anytime you raise standards, achievement will decline. However, you have to look at it not as a decrease necessarily, but a new baseline. We are getting a fresh start here with Common Core, and our students are going to have to be prepared for the higher standard, along with teachers and school leaders and our community and business leaders as well.
Well, we're talking in theory. Here's a student who actually might have to take some tests at some point. So what is your question? Tell us your name.
I'm Wallace Myers, and I represent the Legislative Youth Advisory Council, and I attend Bethel Christian School, a junior. And my question is, how does Common Core affect children with special needs, considering they have to take the same standardized tests as students who do not? Also, like the representative said, there's nothing wrong with holding our students to a higher expectation, but some problems we have noticed is students that do not excel as well are going to be left. Will they be left behind because of this, because there has been some problems with teachers in Calcasieu and Jeff Davis Parish that have said that they have not got their proper textbooks and curriculum for the Common Core until a week before teaching. And how is a teacher supposed to properly train herself a week before teaching to maybe a class of 30 students?
Okay, who would like to take that? Okay.
I'm glad to answer that because I spent 4 hours today in St. Tammany with parents from the Florida parishes and local legislators discussing exactly the problems that special needs students are facing, not only with Common Core, but particularly with the standardized testing regime that we have. And my understanding is the testing is being narrowed down to one test. We did have two, one for students who had more extensive needs than others, and now it's being narrowed down to one. And these parents know their students and their capabilities quite well. Their special needs, a broad spectrum of special needs. They want their students to be able to get a high school diploma so that they can actually go out into the world and be productive citizens. And they have a great fear that because of the standardized tests and the inability of their students to pass it, that they won't be able to achieve that diploma.
Any other Ken? Yeah.
No, I would just say that, we agree. We want all students to have access to a high school diploma. And relative to the testing, students have individual education plans, IEPs, where accommodations are met. There's also an alternative assessment for students that have severe cognitive disabilities called our Allow One test and the Louisiana Alternative Assessment. So there are measures in place for students that need an accommodation that can't take the exam.
All righty. Over to you.
We have a question from someone who came early, got into the front row so she could ask this.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Major Brandon, and I'm an educator, and I'm speaking for myself. But I did talk with some coworkers before I left. The concern is, of course, the Washington Post posted in November that both Massachusetts and Louisiana is delaying. Of course, we all discussed that already. And so if we're delaying because we're not really ready yet, when, how, and where will you train our teachers to be ready? As the young man said, the high school student that's a junior, how will the teachers be prepared? I mean, from one day to the next, things change, especially in ELA and other subjects. We want to know, when are you going to do that? Because it greatly affects instruction, and we're doing all that we can. Thank you.
So let me take that question. So we have been training, and we've been training since 2010 when the standards were adopted. And at first there was a transitional curriculum that came out that took the old standards and transitioned to the Common Core state standards. The department has realigned itself into network teams, and there are network teams that are supporting the school districts. They're out in the field. And third, and Ms. Bennett is a member of one of these, and that's our teacher leaders. We have in the state over 2,000 teachers, one representing each school site in the state, that has attended 4-day training sessions, and then they get monthly follow-up from the department, from the network teams, and these are our teacher leaders in the school system right now. Also, we've provided what we call a teacher support toolbox, which has been developed. It's resources and things to enhance the curriculum which local districts develop for the Common Core state standards. That's on the department website that is continually being updated and enhanced. And maybe Ms. Bennett wants to speak a little bit about that, about how the teachers in your school are learning the Common Core state standards.
Certainly. I appreciate your question so much. I think it really speaks to the phenomenal opportunity that Common Core provides in giving districts the opportunities to really shape their educational experience for the kids in their communities. So as a teacher leader for the state of Louisiana, I have been trained with the other teacher leaders across the state directly by the state in terms of their vision for Common Core, and I have tangible things that I can take back to my school. My district's done a really good job at activating teacher leaders and putting them in positions to train their colleagues, and it has to be an ongoing process and structuring a schedule within a school building to allow for professional learning communities to take place and in classroom support. It's a really transformative way of thinking about education, and our state's doing a tremendous job in providing tons of guidance on the website and even practitioners in the field are elevating and rising to the challenge and supporting each other.
Well, I would say, though, that there are a lot of people, as we saw in our survey before, that just don't feel like they have enough information, because teachers may be getting some information, according to some, but parents want to know. Your question is about parents, right?
I'm Elder Herbert Moore, president of New Home Outreach Program, also executive president of the Instrument Community Association, also a part of South Baton Rouge Community Association, and also part of ExxonMobil Dialogue Group. Wow. My question is, we talked about kids and their curriculum. We talked about teachers and the curriculum and how they are learning, and some of them are not, because I have did research with my people. And also I have some educators in my church. They do the same thing. My thing is, all those people is getting most of the information, what happened to the parents, because the parents is the one at home have to help those kids when they come home with the same curriculum that y'all sending in. A lot of them don't know. It is clueless. So what's the time frame for the parents to learn?
Okay. Who would like to take that one? Parent information?
Sure. I mean, that's a great question.
Great question.
No, at my school, we have had several family nights, and so we open our doors to the community to invite them in to see what's going on in the classroom, to educate them on our standards and our new expectations for student achievement. So we have a very open door policy. I think that more certainly could be done. I know that Stanford Children is launching Stand University for Parents, which is an excellent opportunity for parents to become engaged and to really learn how to support their child at home, which I think is really powerful. But I think it's really important, and I'm glad that this dialogue is happening, because it's like a two-way street where we can re-engage the community in this process.
All right, well,
we have a question from someone with the Kane Center.
Brenda Nixon, and I am a former classroom teacher, so I have been in the trenches with everyone that's involved here as well. We are running right now a professional development program called the Math Science Partnership, and it was all about looking at preparing our teachers in we had a third and fourth grade grant from the State Department of Education, as well as an 8th grade grant to provide that professional development this summer. And I will tell you, it was life-changing for me. I have seen a transformation in our teachers that took place this summer, and when they went back into the classroom and began to implement and really understand what that meant. So how can we really provide teachers with the tools that they need to implement this program correctly and these standards correctly?
Okay. Implementation, Ms. Barrios.
Several things, and one of the huge problems with Common Core was the implementation, and I think everybody, including the Department of Ed, sees that now, which is why they pulled back a little bit. But teachers, first of all, you have to have a curriculum in order to teach a curriculum. And in St. Tammany Parish, I know that the teachers have been working to keep up from month to month in developing that curriculum aligned with the Common Core, because it was pushed up a year, and it wasn't supposed to be fully instituted until next year, and it was pushed up a year. Also, parents need to be a part of that conversation. But first of all, teachers need to understand and have an established curriculum before they can do that with parents. So the State Department, rather than providing the teachers with what they think they need, it really needs to work the other way. Teachers need to be brought into that process more, and they need to be to discuss what student needs are. And I think I'm not a math teacher, but I hear universally from early education math teachers that one of the huge problems with the new Common Core math and the way it's presented is that early childhood or younger students think concretely, and that expecting them to begin the algebraic concepts so early is very frustrating to those students who don't think abstractly, and it requires abstract thinking. And those are the kind of things that educators need to input into the Department of Ed.
Mr. Bradford? The department would agree with Ms. Barrios that we need teacher-driven resources and not department-driven resources. And that's what we have been doing, is we are providing resources to teachers that are developed by Louisiana teachers.
Well, and we hope also the parents will learn some more from tonight's program, certainly. We didn't get the whole answer, but there's lots of information on the website of DOE as well, and LPB will be covering some more, and that's all the time, though, we have for this particular program. Kirby, thank you for co-hosting with me, and I want to thank our panelists, especially Mr. Miller, thank you, Ms. Barrios, Mr. Bradford, Representative Geymann, and Ms. Bennett for sharing their expertise on tonight's topic, and we encourage you to visit our website at www.lpb.org/Public Square. While you're there, take this month's survey. Look through Common Core resources. We have all sorts of things up there to look at. And comment on tonight's show. We'd love to hear from you. And Kirby, to you.
And thank you all for being a great audience. Tune in next month as Louisiana Public Square explores energy's environmental footprint. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you. Thank you.
For a copy of this program, call 1-800-973-7246 or go online to www.lpb.org. This program was made possible in part by funding from Education's Next Horizon, Louisiana's only statewide nonprofit dedicated solely to improving pre-K through 12 education, and a leading advocate for policies that ensure college and career readiness. And ExxonMobil Baton Rouge, investing in a brighter future for today's students by focusing its energy on science, technology, engineering, and math education. Support for this program is also provided by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting.